Have you been working here 12 years? Asked the new vice president, leafing through my personal file like a cafe menu. Wow, that's a rarity. Just like an ancient artifact. I stood in his glass office with a printout in one hand and an iced coffee in the other. The sun glinted on his new furniture. Everything was white, fashionable, too clean for our old building. It all looked like a temporary government. And expensive consultants. 12 years. You probably know all the secrets, he chuckled. I buried many of my own secrets. I answered with a forced smile. He didn't laugh, he just nodded. At that moment, I realized the company culture had changed. Subtly, but definitely. I came here when the server rooms hummed like tunnels, and invoices were written manually in CCAL. I built a supplier system, changed purchases, carried out all the migrations, and kept the reports clean. My title is Director of Operations. It doesn't sound grand, but everything went through me. Lawyers, finance, IT, logistics. But now Whitmarna's VP chat room had appeared, a man with a linked photo, like he was a lacrosse coach at a private school. His mission was to modernize the company. For him, that meant burning everything old and doing it his way. 3 weeks later, he fired my 2 old managers, reliable, experienced, and ostentatious. He brought in his own people in their place. One of them, Trent, didn't even know what vendor Latchkin was, but he talked a lot about synergy. They started dragging my team to their meetings, asking vague questions, and taking credit for others' work. They scheduled their meetings on top of ours, and then complained that we weren't cross-functional enough. I knew what was going on. Rumors of a major deal were swirling. I heard hints at meetings, saw documents being downloaded for review, and at night, one of Chad's people was forwarding HR spreadsheets. Then came the blow, the letter about a company-wide reorganization. On Friday, 4:57 p.m., my name was there, but now I reported to the Business Infrastructure Department and reported on a dotted line to some guy who seemed to be writing his thesis using chat. No call, no conversation, just a line on a list. On my way in, I drank cheap red wine from a thermos and stared at the ceiling fan as if it were a roulette wheel. I wasn't afraid. It was worse. I realized the truth. People like me aren't architects anymore. We're old systems, useful until they're replaced. On Monday, Chap came to my desk like we were in some kind of sitcom. Big changes, yes, but everything's fine. I want you to help the newbies. Pass on your experience, he said. I smiled politely. Sure. I'll show them where all the wires are buried. Just don't let them cut the red ones. He didn't get the joke, or he pretended to. He thought he'd already disarmed me. Wrong. I started recording everything. Every access change, every version of slides, every shared document where they removed my name. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I knew the foundation was crumbling. When it all exploded, it wouldn't be my fault. The first was a Slack from Trent, his henchman. Need access to old documents. We're putting together a data room for an audit. Can you help? Please, without explanation. A day later, I was already rummaging through 37 folders, collecting financial reports, charts, and compliance rules. Their team didn't even know where anything was, and worse, they didn't understand what it meant. Their resumes were a jumble of buzzwords and nonsense. One called our incident response plan a soft cybersecurity framework for SVIBes. Another described our contracts as a promise from vendors based on trust and a handshake. I wanted to print it out and burn it, but I fixed it all. Quietly, carefully as always. 6 grueling days. Twice I stayed until midnight, checking lawyers, marking red lines they hadn't noticed. In one document, an error could nullify half. I fixed our support contracts before anyone even realized. None. Thank you. Not even a nod. On Friday, I overheard Chad in the kitchen. He was talking to our CFO, opening a can of Leroy, as if he were recording a podcast. It's still here because no one else wants to do the dirty work. A kind of glue from the past. Useful while the upgrade is in progress. I didn't flinch, didn't start a fight. I just stood behind the refrigerator door and looked at the post-it note I'd written for myself, the audit logs. Versions of the recovery plan, because you know what? When you're underestimated, this space is there. The space to listen, to move, to prepare. And then I noticed one of the old contracts had the name Martin Devlin, senior partner at Helbert Cordy Kranzesherm. And the picture in my head became clearer than ever. 6 years ago, Martin and I practically lived in the work conference room for 3 months straight. Back then, there was a hectic procurement integration going on. One of his portfolio companies had messed up the migration software, and the merger almost fell through. I was a consultant then, working 20 hours a day, sorting out supplier schemes, renegotiating supply chains, untangling 6 different licenses. Martin said little, but he watched everything closely. When the deal finally closed on time, it was he who shook my hand and said, "You don't talk like a lawyer. That's why people listen to you." Now he was the main buyer. I was back in the oven. The chat didn't even recognize my name. His people were also too busy playing Future C in front of the mirror. The irony was that Martin would be the one reading the documents that his team had shredded, and I was quietly reassembling. My name was still in the appendices. Not on the cover, but in the metadata, footnotes, digital traces that cannot be cleaned. I added another document. Our old disaster recovery plan, written by me, signed with the archive Helbert Cordy Engement. Set the right to external viewing only. Cannot delete, cannot move. It will lie there like a mine, silent, precise, patient. Let the chat think I'm a janitor. I'm not doing this for the sake of thank you. I'm doing this for the sake of memory. I found out I wasn't invited to the preparatory meeting by accident. How do you know if you were crossed out by mistake? One newbie, Aaron, who until now had been putting 2 spaces after the period and calling every meeting sync, left a printout on the shared printer. I wasn't spying, I just wanted to pick up my budget report, but there was Chado's deck there for the final review. The third slide is the 2025 leadership team. Photo bios, except for mine. My place was taken by Trend, who's only been here 11 weeks. His bio was copied from some Forbes list, and he even misspelled the word sustainability. Worse, in one internal document, my position was quietly demoted to senior analyst. Senior analyst. After 12 years and 4 restructurings with 1 keystroke, without a conversation, without emails, just a slow erasure of personality through file versions. I didn't explode or complain. That's what they were waiting for. Emotions, noise, a reason to dump me completely. Instead, I went back to my room, closed the door, and created a folder called Uninvited. Half an hour later, Trend wrote to me in SLC, "Please send me the documents on Complos before he forgets I'm his courier." I replied, "Sure, give me 10 minutes. And I did much more. Inside room, I created a clean folder for him. All documents double-checked. All compliance links confirmed. No errors, no omissions. And I added one last file, Business Port Arian. This is the document Martin and I wrote 7 years ago at the end of that chaotic deal. It still had the Hellart at Curdy watermark. On the first page was a cover letter with the signature, my name, position, and contact from that time. Inside were disaster recovery plans, risk models, implementation logs. Nothing flashy, nothing loud. But this document had something that wasn't in the child's materials. Real experience. Scars from real work under pressure. I downloaded it with read-only rights. The external one could be opened, viewed, even saved, but you can't delete or hide it without breaking the entire folder structure. Then I attached the archive in 3D SLC. Here you go. I also included the document on Crantonerda. Tell me if anything is missing. Trent responded with an emoji with a raised finger. I restrained myself from flipping the table over. In the morning, Chat and his retinue were sitting in the meeting room with Martin's team, and I was at my desk, without a position, without an invitation. But the story wasn't over yet, because I knew what Chat didn't understand. Martin didn't believe in beautiful presentations. He believed in documents, in memory, in experience. He would definitely find out about that one file that once really saved him a deal. He told me, "A system is only valuable when there is a person capable of restoring it in the dark from scratch under fire." This person is me. I just put a flare right in his roadmap. I could see them through the tinted glass of the conference room. Chat posed as if he were filming a Netflix documentary about himself. He waved his arms, molding the future out of thin air. Next to him, Trend was leafing through a folder like a priest praying, who doesn't understand anything about it. The lights were dimmed. The project screen was lit. The final review of the deal with Hurt was underway, the most important meeting in the company's history. And I sat outside like some random guy without a name. But this was not unexpected. That morning I found the final Bayer deck. It wasn't spying, just plain carelessness. One of Trent's files was stuck in the general sink, and I opened it. Slide, operational efficiency and post-transaction optimization. And below is a sub-item about eliminating obsolete roles. My department included the chat there, not by name, but clearly. And another note, excess of support staff. Support staff? Seriously? You've been building systems from scratch for over 10 years, surviving 4 restructurings, 2 compliance regimes, and a ton of mergers without a single penalty. And suddenly support. And then it got even better. Another slide read, key people we'll retain after the merger. Trent and Aaron's names were there. Mine wasn't. I was sitting at my desk. My name tag still said director. My email signature did too. But the message was clear. I'm a legacy, a problem to be eliminated, not a person to be kept. Inside the room, the chat clicked on a slide. Resilience roadmap. Nonsense. His team cobbled together from old documents and a couple of requests to chat. And then it happened. Martin Devlin, calm, impenetrable, still as fit as an athlete despite being in his late 50s, turned the page on his printout. He paused, put it back, brought it closer to his eyes, as if checking the signature, and then looked straight at me. No nod, no smile, just a direct, businesslike gaze. 2 seconds, then back to the page. The chat continued chatting, oblivious. We plan to shut down legacy features and move to a more agile structure, he said. Martin was silent. Another man from Hilbert, about 40 years old with a sleek hairdo, looked at Martin, then at the document, then at me. I didn't move, didn't smile. There was no need. That document with the Hilbert watermark and my name and signature wasn't just technical paper. It was a reminder of the merger we saved, of the system we restored, of the past that can't be erased from the presentation. And the chat kept talking about efficiency. Martin closed the folder. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue, but something changed in the air. You could feel it even through the glass. Only the chat didn't realize that the room had become cold. It happened exactly 32 minutes into the meeting. The chat opened a slide, the conclusion of non-strategic personnel, and began speaking with such a smug gait that you could have issued a fine. We spent the quarter looking for unnecessary links in our arch structure, he said. They're old personnel, people who have been here for a long time, but we need a hungrier culture. People who move faster, think bigger. And he looked straight at Martin, grinned, as if they were old friends sharing a joke, and added the phrase, like a punchline. You can always find someone hungrier. Silence. It was not in the room itself, but I felt it spread through the walls like a depressurization. Through the glass, I saw Martin blink once slowly, lean back, interlaced his fingers and looked at his child, as if he had just seen him swallow a nail. Then, without a word, he slammed the folder shut, loudly so that all heads looked up. Even the chat fell silent. Martin stood up. I think that's it. It wasn't a proposal, not a request. It was a decision. The chat blinked, confused. Sorry, but Martin's voice hasn't raised yet. Has Int wavered? It was the calm not before the storm, but after it. The answer was on the table, said Martin and nodded at the folder. And you insulted. All heads turned. Some looked at the screen, some at the folder. A couple of people looked at me through the glass wall. I didn't move. I sat at the table, my hands on the keyboard. The cursor blinked on the open document. Post-deal implementation roadmap. In the room, the woman from Hillerth closed her laptop without looking at anyone. The man quickly wrote something, tore out the sheet, folded it, and put it in his pocket. The chat faltered. If that's the case, we can explain the plan in more detail. Some changes are just theory for now. No, said Martin. This is not a theory. This is disrespect. You sold us a house and called the foundation garbage. Trent opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, then changed his mind. Closed it. Martin didn't even wait for an answer. He went to the door. He stopped only for a second, looked at the folder on the table, the very one with my document. No one followed him. No one stopped him. And the chat just stood and blinked, a man playing checkers on a chessboard, not understanding the rules. I exhaled through my nose. Neither relief nor victory, just clarity. They say that the moment power changes is hard to notice, that it's always gradual. But sometimes it happens when a person gets up, closes the folder, and walks away from a deal worth hundreds of millions just because you confused hungry with smart. He sat motionless. The storm changed direction, and I found myself in the center of it. Panic didn't come right away. It seeped in like water under a closed door. By 10:15 a.m., the glass conference room was empty. Vita Chata had scattered like spilled rice. Some pretended to return to work, others whispered into Slack, pale, their shoulders twitching. Trent looked like he'd met a ghost and upset it. At 10:27 a.m., an invitation arrived from the lawyers. An urgent meeting of the deal's risk board. 10 minutes later, another from the financiers. A review of staff retention conditions. And then the barrage began. Letters with red flags. The phones were ringing like a Christmas tree in a thunderstorm. One of the lawyers accidentally hit reply to all in the thread. Do I need to disclose this? What exactly? That our vice president insulted the architects of the company's entire operating system right in front of the buyers. That he bragged that he would destroy the only structure that could function after the deal. And I was sitting at my desk, not gloating, not smiling. I was already making a list in my head of who to call back, what systems to check, what holes to plug because the buyer hadn't left. Not completely. At 11:3, an email arrived from Martin Devlin's office. Not to Chad, not to the lawyers, to the board of directors. Short, clear subject. Revised terms of the Ertinserschirm. Body of the email. The deal remains possible subject to structural changes. Continuity of management will be a condition of execution. Request for recommendations without a signature. Just a PDF with a watermark. Project confidential. Structural changes, continuity of management. In other words, leave house, change the locks. At 11:22, a new email appeared in my inbox. Not a work email, but through an old secure channel for consultants I hadn't used in 6 years. The sender was a consortium partner with whom I had once gone through that procurement hell together. He always called me the closer, even though I was never officially on their payroll. The message was short. Can you talk confidentially today? No emojis, no calendário links. Just that phrase. I closed the tab and took a sip of the cold coffee I'd thrown away during Chad's speeches. Everything around me was seething. Executives scurried back and forth like cockroaches under a lamp. I saw Chad leave the conference room, pressing the phone to his ear and almost hissing. I don't care what the board says. He insulted me in my own building. Not your building anymore, Chad. Not if the wallet is in other hands. At noon, Char sent out a global notice. All personnel changes are temporarily frozen pending a board decision. By 12:30, we were sitting with my old team. Informally, just in a break room. A paper cup with stale coffee, one notepad with scribbles between us. I said nothing about the letter, nothing about Martin. I just looked at them and asked, if we have to replan the flight, how quickly can we do it? They exchanged glances, then looked at me. No one asked why. No one doubted it was necessary. This is what happens when you're kept underground for a long time. You forget you can breathe. And for the first time in months, the air became thin and electric. They thought I was tech support, but I turned out to be a backup plan. The board met in a large room on the 24th floor. There, with the frosted glass, the ancient mahogany table that had survived 3 takeovers. And that same flower in the corner that no one watered because legend had it. It was brought from a funeral home. Invitation had arrived at 7:08 a.m. Subject. Board meeting. Closed briefing. 10 minutes. No agenda, no slides. Just me. I didn't ask questions, didn't prepare any fancy presentations. I took a single printed sheet, 12 points, 12 years of work condensed into systems that kept the company on its feet. For Chad, the vision was to rename the department. For me, to show what really holds the structure together. The elevator went up in silence. Only the hum of the cables and the weight of inevitability in my back. Outside, Chat paced the corridor. His tie was askew, his sleeves rolled up, his jaw clenched, as if he were about to arm wrestle an entire consortium of investors. He didn't look directly at me, but his nostrils flared when the secretary opened the door and called, "Ms. Reed, they're waiting for you." I entered. The air was cold and still. 10 seats, 8 occupied, 1 empty, and still warm Chadovo. He wasn't invited back. Martin Devlin sat in the center. The chairman and 2 outside lawyers sat nearby. Martin's face was calm, but his eyes followed me, like someone who already knew the ending of the story. He just wanted to make sure I was reading the same script. I didn't waste time. I laid a single sheet of paper on the table. No fancy presentations, no long speeches. "Here are the 12 core systems that hold the company together," I said. I built 7 from scratch, for had to be redesigned after mistakes by the old management to pass inspections. I received 1 supplier contract management system that was broken. It has now processed $142 million annually without a single failure for 3 years in a row. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. All processes on which the buyer's assessment is based go through these systems. They did not appear by chance. They weren't built by Chat Whitmore. And they won't be able to be controlled by people who consider the operating system outdated and want to shut it down. The room became quiet. The chairman of the council nodded. One of the lawyers adjusted her glasses and carefully examined the sheet. There were no questions, only reading. I took a breath and said, "I'm not here for gratitude. I'm here to make sure what I've built doesn't go to those who believe that words are more important than stable work. This will all be for about 10 minutes, no more." I stood up, nodded, and left. Chat was still hanging around, pretending not to wait. He saw me and tried to grin, but the grin fell off his face like a wilted office flower. I didn't say anything, and there was no need to. He already knew something had changed. The foundation on which he stood was not his. It was mine, and now it has been noticed. At 16:02 a.m., general letter about the company arrived. The timing was cleverly chosen. Too late for news, but early enough for everyone to raise their blood pressure. Topic: organizational changes. New management. Text: as of this moment, Whitmer's Chat is no longer working for the company. We thank him for his contribution and wish him success in the future. All. No farewell lunch, no highlights. Just a digital obituary for a career that collapsed under the weight of its own ego. The second paragraph was even louder. The new integration team will be led by Margaret Reed under the direct control of the board. This team will be responsible for ensuring stability in the final stage of negotiations with Hillard Ikurdi Karansorsham. And that's how everything changed. Not loudly, not with confetti, but so that people sat up straight in their chairs. Slack froze. The letters remained unfinished. You could almost hear everyone shifting their stance, realizing that the man they had previously ignored was now their leader. I didn't say anything. Walked past Chad's ghostly office. His board was still half covered with buzzwords and erased dreams. He entered our department. My old team was already gathered there. Nobody clapped, but everyone's eyes said one thing. It's about time. Everyone who was transferred to other departments last quarter, return here before the end of the day. I said, we're rebuilding the command center. Same tools, same goals, only more precise. To the side stood a trend with a cup of coffee, clearly not poured from his coffee pot. He opened his mouth, either to say something or to complain. I didn't even look at him. You're not on this team, I said, and all without a show, just like deleting a broken file. By 6 p.m., I was back at my desk, the same one that had never been given to anyone else. Even after my position was removed from the diagram, I opened the plan card, which I had been quietly keeping for all the months while I was kept aside. Stage 1, stabilize systems. Stage 2, restructure management. Stage 3, restore with continuity conditions. I changed the status in the table from pending to active. At that moment, a notification came, signed the updated Helberter and Sherm. I opened it there in black and white. The deal is possible only if operational management is maintained and key specialists are fully retained. It was a legal knife in a soft wrapper. Polite, put it away, we're leaving. I signed, closed the tab, took out a notepad, and began to draw a new subordination matrix. No celebration, no champagne. Only the hum of printers and the ringing of phones, sounding like the rhythm of work. The systems woke up under the hands of those who knew how to keep them alive. It wasn't a resurrection, it was a reboot. I didn't disappear anywhere. I just waited. The joint strategy session was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. Neither coffee nor chatter would get together by then. The Hillart people didn't like anything unnecessary. They worked with a precision that made many executives sweat. The room had been changed. The glass walls of the haze had been cleared of its bold slogans. The table had been widened. The nameplates were neat, laser printed. At 8:58, I walked in. Neither the first nor the last on time. No laptop. Just a pen, a notepad, and a marker. The Hillart team was already seated. 10 people, 3 laptops, not a single unnecessary movement. Our executives were opposite, quieter than before, reorganized. Then Martin Devlin walked in. No tie, no brieftasa. He simply shook hands, nodded like a lawyer, then calmly walked straight to me. Margaret, he said quietly but confidently, without an architect, there's no value. It's good that you stayed. Those words were enough. He turned to the audience. Let's begin. The vice president was gone. Trent had been transferred somewhere to minor audits. The chat had disappeared. They were talking. He's suing over the exit conditions. The board was silent. No one regretted it. I stood at the board. No fanfare, no PowerPoint, just the sound of markers. I drew a diagram, strict, clean, in colors like muscles and bones. Systems, processes, protocols, team retention, plans for failures. Every line made sense, every arrow a story. I didn't make excuses, I showed the result. Halfway through the presentation, one of the people from Hillerth, about 40 years old, with a sharp look and in an expensive dark blue suit, leaned back in his chair. The others fell silent and looked at him. Everyone knew this was the future CEO, even if the papers hadn't been signed yet. He tapped his pen on the table and said into the air, "That's it." She had to leading from the very beginning. The silence wasn't awkward, but respectful, because everyone understood he was right. I closed the marker, returned to my seat, and took a sip of black coffee, the same kind I drank back when the servers were in the basement and the lights flickered if they printed 2 pages at once. From that moment on, the meeting changed. They weren't just asking my opinion. They were looking to me. Not rudely, but because they acknowledged me. They finally saw what I'd built and preserved. No one clapped, no one made toasts. But when I walked out, it wasn't the same door I'd entered through. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't walking away from something. I was moving forward, not for a promotion, not for authority, but for what was rightfully mine.